That big, beautiful, porous, open interior, there it is. The way an English muffin should be. Howdy folks, welcome to Texas Cooking Today. I'm Stuart Trotter, your host. This is a cooking tutorial for Texas Cooking Today, and you've seen what we're about to make. So I'll tell you what, let's get right into it. Well, howdy folks, and welcome back to Texas Cooking Today. Guys, this is the Texas Cooking Today tutorial on how to make English muffins. Now, if you're not looking for a full-on cooking tutorial and you're maybe an advanced cook and you're just needing the basics or the recipe, or if you're just wanting to watch a little more basic cooking show, please try the episode right before this. And that'll be basically a regular cooking show on English muffins on this same recipe. This, though, is a full-on tutorial that contains all of the information, every bit of it. So guys, let me explain. When I was a little boy, Mom would buy English muffins. She would toast them. I would put butter on them. And I learned to love that flavor, and I learned to love that texture. The coarse grain texture on the inside of the bread, once it's toasted, it's wonderful. But what's special about it is the fact that the pores inside the bread are large, and they have various sizes to them, and it's not necessarily a very smooth or even texture. And in bread making, they call that the crumb, okay? It's not crumbs that fall out of it, it's just that the texture on the inside of the bread is referred to as the crumb. So we're looking for a very coarse and uneven crumb in our bread. Well, that's kind of hard to achieve because most flour doughs want to rise up with an even crumb. They just kind of do it naturally. That white bread syndrome, I call it. And you may have tried making English muffins before and you ran into this problem. I did, and that was why I decided to research it and develop a recipe that fixes the problem. And that's what I did. I knew that the commercial industry was getting it right. So what I did is I studied their techniques, learned how they were doing it, and then developed a recipe for the home kitchen based upon the techniques and methods used in commercial baking to make English muffins. So guys, on this tutorial, you're going to get the lowdown on how to make a fantastic English muffin. Now let's get in the kitchen and make these up. Come on. Okay guys, so you'll know some of the things you're going to need. We have a sheet pan with parchment paper on it, and I have 2 layers of parchment there. Also, I have a bowl with a sifter, another bowl to mix in, and I have an egg down in there, and then I have the rest of my ingredients ready to go. So we're going to get busy sifting that flour, mixing together our wet ingredients, and then we're going to make our dough. Something you want to remember here is the dough has to be very, very viscous. It's not quite a batter. At the same time, it's not really a very handleable dough. Something that I found helps is having a disher. This disher holds about 1.5 ounce level, so when it's heaping, it's about 2 ounces worth of material there. This, just a regular spatula. This is going to come in handy when making this, and you're going to need one of these, a silicone spatula. And I'm going to start beating the egg just with a regular whisk. I want to beat in that milk also. So there we have our egg, our milk. I want to go ahead and get my sugar. That's the next thing in. Once the sugar is in, let's go in with the yeast and get that beaten in. My salt, guys, I'm going to be mixing it in with the flour. The butter, I'm going to beat that in here in just a little bit. But the first thing I'm going to allow this to do is to do what's called proofing. And that's where the yeast rises up and it kind of proves to us that it's active. Okay, so you proof your yeast. This is old world thinking, okay? It used to be that yeast wasn't always so guaranteed, okay? And it didn't have a best buy date, so you just kind of had to wing it. Well, this is what we would do to know whether the yeast that we're using was good or not, or whether or not we needed to break out some more yeast because this yeast was not so hot. That way you don't waste all of your ingredients. Next thing we're going to move on to, guys, is sifting, and this is really important, more so than a lot of people think. So as I get these ingredients out of my way, the things I don't need, what I will need, my salt and my flour. To get the flour transferred, it's a lot easier just to scoop it, guys. So just take your measuring cup or whatever you have to scoop it up. Place it right there in your sifter. If you don't have a sifter, you can use a strainer. I'll pull one of these down. A strainer like this, put your flour in there and you turn it at an angle and then bump it with your hand. The reason you turn it is because when you bump it, it rides right over to where you're bumping, it'll overflow the side. So you just bump it with your hand at an angle and it sifts out beautifully, guys. Now I'm going to put my salt over this. I'm going to measure in most of the rest, and I'm going to leave behind about 1/4 cup to 1/3 cup. Okay, so it's not a rush on that. If the flour I have here doesn't make my dough firm enough, I have a little bit of extra, and that's why I said this is about 1 3/4 to 2 cups. The reason, and I've explained this in other videos where we're baking. Flour is fickle, plain and simple. So flour has this tendency to, even with the same brand, if you buy the same brand, the same type of the same brand, and then go back a year later and purchase the same brand again, that exact same flour, the two aren't going to hydrate exactly the same. All right, and that's sort of one of the problems when it comes to flour. It varies between brands, and in between years, in between crops, in between climate cycles such as drought. It all affects it, and it affects the way it absorbs moisture. So a bread that requires 1 3/4 cup one time may, with a different flour, require slightly more or less the next time. So that's just the nature of baking, and that's one of the things that makes baking a true art form. You'll need a scooper, and as I mentioned before, you're going to need one of these. What we're going to do is we're going to start mixing together our dough, and this is really, really simple. I have this. I'm going to give it a moment more to finish doing its thing. I'm going to go ahead and pour my butter in. So now, guys, it's down to pretty simple numbers. I've got to get the flour into this, not the other way around. We do not pour the liquid into the flour. That doesn't work that way, guys. The way this recipe works is we slowly add the flour until we get the exact right texture, the exact right consistency that we're looking for. Now, what that consistency is, that's a real difficult trick. And that is, honestly, the trick in making good English muffins. What we have to do is have a real super high hydration dough. And that high hydration dough then allows those large pockets of gas to build inside of the muffin before we bake it. So that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're going to get. Now, guys, as we're waiting for that yeast to proof, and I don't really need to proof my yeast. I'm simply showing this to you, okay? I want you to see what it looks like when you've made sure that your yeast is active. And, you know, if you're got plenty of packets of yeasts and it really doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter. But if you're, let's say, in the middle of Alaska and getting more yeast is going to be a matter of months, well, I can understand it would be very important to proof your yeast. Plus, you can assure yourself that you don't waste any ingredients this way. Now, let me tell you some background for those of you watching the cook-along tutorial. I would make these English muffins, and every time the flavor was good. It was a homemade bread, so yeah, it was going to taste good, but the texture was never right, and it drove me nuts. So I decided, if I'm going to do an English muffin recipe, it's not going to be a same old recipe like everybody else's that you're seeing. Okay, that's the reason my thumbnail looked different. That's the reason the texture on the inside of the bread looked different, was because I researched this out and then developed a recipe that really works. Okay, so what I did is I took the idea of good bread making, which is lots of flavor, milk, butter, egg. Man, that makes a flavorful bread. Ooh, it just banging good. At the same time, I wanted to get the texture that big industry is capable of doing every single time. Well, I knew high hydration doughs are generally what give better texture like that. So I basically knew what to target. But watching it perform itself out on a production and assembly line made a lot of things clear, because I saw there was a lot of cornmeal used. I saw that the dough wasn't the kind of dough that you could hold in your hand like a ball. It wouldn't even hold its shape. When the dough is right, if you make a ball of it, it'll just kind of ooze down flat into this like a pancake, but it won't be perfectly flat. In other words, it can't be batter-like. So a little more stiff than a batter and a whole lot less firm than a dough. That's what we're looking for. And that was the consistency I saw in factory use. I was like, oh yeah, so extremely high hydration, not a problem. Then, as I watched and studied it being done, it was risen in bowls with lots of cornmeal so it would not stick, which is the reason when you get an English muffin at the store, it is caked in cornmeal. They use a ton of it, all right? And so the same thing here, using a lot of it because it's not handleable without it, period. After it was risen, I noticed they would just immediately turn it out and run it through the oven right then and there. They did not fry it as, tradition might hold. In factory version, no, it's baked. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to bake it in an oven. So we get the same textures as that factory made bread, but at the same time, we're going to get the flavor of homemade. So it's the best of both worlds. So that's the reason you watch the cook along tutorial, is to find out the who, what, when, why, and how that it came about. It's starting to get frothy. I'll give it a few more minutes and you can take a look at what it looks like when it's all proofed and we're ready to go. There we go, guys. It's only been a couple of minutes. You can see this frothy state that's building up under that butter. And of course, some of the butter is congealed on the sides, and that's not really a big deal, okay? So don't sweat that at all. I have here everything that we're going to need, plus over on the side I've got my sheet pan with parchment. Now I'm going to do a close-up of this so that you get a real good idea of the exact viscosity that we're going for here. First thing I'm going to do is start with my measuring cup. I'm going to put a little bit of flour in here. And at first, this is just like making a batter, okay? Pardon my clanging noises. Part of being in the kitchen, there's a certain amount of noise that gets made. Now, so you'll know, the reason I am slowly working the flour in, and this is quite important, guys, is you want it to hydrate evenly. At the same time, you don't want any lumps. We've sifted it to make sure that there were absolutely no lumps, that there wasn't any foreign material in it that shouldn't be there. See, it's getting thicker. Pretty soon it'll be too thick for me to use this whisk. Now I take my spatula and just keep working it. So as you see, this is starting to kind of take on some characters, sort of in a strange way, wanting to start holding a shape, but it really isn't. Okay, we still have flour left in our first bowl here. We'll sprinkle in a little more. As I say, we're just going to slowly work it in. There is no rush. And you want it to take it in slowly so you can get the exact right moisture content, guys. See how it's sort of staying up now? But still wants to be fluid, a little viscous, but still too batter-like for what I'm looking for. So more flour goes in. Now the neat thing about learning to do it this way is you see that it's possible to make something like this by hand. You don't need a mixer, you don't need machinery, you don't have to have a food processor. All right, you can make those English muffins by hand, okay? It's not going to be a major consequence in life. Just in case, I plan to go ahead and sift off that remaining flour. I don't think I'll need it, but if I do, it'll be there. So you can see it's becoming very unmanageable, but it's starting to take on more of the characteristics of a dough than a batter. And there's where we're trying to get with it, okay? Once that incorporates the rest of that flour, guys, that's going to be perfect. See how it's starting to pull up like a dough, but it's still super sticky, okay? We are there. I'm finished doing the mixing, then I'm going to let it rest for about 1 to 2 minutes, not very long, just long enough to know that the flour I put in there is starting to, the gluten is starting to activate on it, and that's what I'm needing from that. We have finished up that beautiful, beautiful dough that we've made. It's very, very sticky, okay? It's not handleable by hand. If you try to pull some out and work it, it's just going to be all over you. Don't even try, okay? So using a large spoon or a scoop, I'm using a scoop, I'm going to pull up. There we go. So I'm just going to drop it right down. Come on, get out of there. See what I mean by very hard to handle? There we go. Don't worry about its shape. Just get it down into our cornmeal. Now I'm going to take it and roll it. That one was a pretty large one, guys. After I've rolled it, I'm going to simply flip him over onto my hand, back to my other. See, I'm just trying to drop off some of that excess cornmeal. Okay? Now, with him fully coated, put him on the baking sheet. All right? Just want to kind of form him a little bit, make a nice shape. See how it doesn't really go flat, but it doesn't hold its shape well either? That means you got it right. So I want to press these down to about the thickness of a thin pancake. There we go. And let them rise. Now let's just go right on to the next one, and I'm going to keep working them the exact same way, guys. Do not obsess over the size or shape. They will take on their own in time. Now guys, I'm going to go ahead and put some plastic wrap over my English muffins. This is just to keep them from drying out on top. I don't want my English muffins actually contacting this plastic wrap, because if it contacts the wrap for very long, it's going to end up wanting to stick to it, and when I pull the plastic wrap off, then suddenly they will deflate, and I don't want that occurrence. So guys, on your English muffins, let's make sure that you watch them. When the plastic wrap starts touching, we'll take this off and cover them with a soft towel. We have it under plastic wrap. It's ready to rise. It's going to be anywhere from 1 to 2 hours now. Just give it time. There's no rush. And we're going to bake it up at 350 to 375 degrees. If you want, put these in a nice warm area to rise, and when it's time, they'll let you know, because they'll be about 1 inch thick almost, 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch thick. Guys, it has been about 1.5 hours. They have risen up, and my oven is preheated to 375. Let's get these right on down in there. There we go. All right, guys, it's in the oven now, ready to cook up. It's going to take it, well, it's going to take it as long as it takes. Probably about 20 to 30 minutes on average. Well, we'll take a look. This is a brand new recipe, like I said, so guys, I've just pulled these out of the oven. As you can see, they're all irregular, nothing special about any of them. They're nice and brown on bottom and on top. They're perfect little English muffins. In a little bit, we're going to slice them open. I'm just going to let them cool for a few minutes, and once they're cooled, we're going to enjoy. Guys, our English muffins have had a chance to cool down enough for me to cut into one, so I'll tell you what, let's do exactly that. Now, tradition says that you are to fork split these. So that means I'm going to cut it open with a knife. Yeah, I know, I'm breaking all the rules, aren't I? Now, it was about that crumb on the inside. Remember when I said that was what we were going for? That big, beautiful, porous, open interior? There it is. The way an English muffin should be. All right, guys, as promised, here we have your ingredients list. Now, as you saw, we were using cornmeal and there was plenty of it. I started with about 1 cup of cornmeal. My original recipe had a half a cup, but I really didn't think it was enough, so I added more. And as you saw, there was a lot left over. So you can save it. You can still use that cornmeal. Don't throw it away. It's perfectly good. All you've done was use it to roll dough, okay? So it's fine. I started with 2 cups of flour, and that was before sifting. So I measured out 2 cups, and then we went into the sifting process, and then we started adding it into the mix as you saw. The idea there is you don't want to throw everything in because you may get the wrong texture. It may not be hydrated enough. 1 3/4 cup of milk. I believe that's also about 200 milliliters if you're on metric system. It's also right about 6 ounces, okay? So 3/4 cup of milk, 1 egg, 1 tablespoon of butter, and we melt that, 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and 1 package of dry yeast. That would be 2 1/4 teaspoons if you're measuring it off of bulk, all right? Make sure you're using fast rising yeast, guys. You want to use either commercial yeast, bread machine yeast, or the package needs to say fast rise, okay? That's the right stuff to use. These are your ingredients. You've seen how it's made. So please give this recipe a try, and when you do, you're going to absolutely fall in love. Oh guys, there they are. Look at that. Remember when I told you that we were going to get that fantastic crumb on the inside? Check it out. That's what I'm talking about. Those big, uneven, huge pores that make for a real English muffin. Not to mention the flavor. That takes English muffin right up to that whole new level. Oh, guys. The flavor of homemade bread is just remarkable. Pardon me. Oh, the flavor of that is just incredible. It's so good. I'm going to toast it. I'm going to put some butter on it, and I'm going to enjoy this the way I grew up enjoying English muffins. Guys, I hope you do exactly the same thing. I would like to say thank you very much to everyone who has watched this show. I would like to say thank you to all of my subscribers, and if you haven't, well, please do subscribe. Click the bell. That way you'll know when I put out new recipes. By the way, guys, that's normally on Thursdays, so keep up. There's great recipes coming. Every week, I try to drop a new recipe. Done it for the last 2 years. I plan to keep on doing it. So keep in touch. Great stuff to come. Please subscribe. And one last thing, please share my videos and just have a good day. Bye-bye. Well, there it is, folks. Texas Cooking Today video tutorial. I do appreciate you coming to my show and watching. If you would, please go to my channel, check out some of the other good stuff I have there. And again, thank you very much for watching.